Hey guys, welcome to episode 7. Can you believe it? We are up to episode 7 of season 2 on Resolute TV. This will be a great episode. We have Lloyd Russell, the president of the Liberal Democratic Party of Australia. So that'll be a very interesting discussion to see if Dean in fact agrees with everything Lloyd says. It will be fun. And we also have our resident Doctor of Wrongthink, Stephen Wells. That is all today on this episode of Resolute TV. See you later, guys.
Rightio, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, everything in between. Freedom Chef Dean McRae here for Resolute TV. We're on to episode 7 for series 2. Who would have thought that when we kind of threw this together here a few months ago that we would be 17 episodes of the actual program in, plus all the little side projects we've done as well. It's been an interesting little adventure, this Resolute TV capability. Now, I'm unashamedly a member of the Liberal Democrats political party. I've run as a candidate for the Liberal Democrats. I wear the T-shirt sometimes, put the banner behind. It's one of my areas of, well, over the last 5 years, it's been a pretty big commitment for me personally, and I've seen a lot of changes in the party, good, bad, and indifferent. There's a natural ebb and flow in life. But today, and we're gonna have this interview split into 2. But I'm fortunate enough to have the current Liberal Democratic Party of Australia's national president, Lloyd Russell. Thanks for coming aboard, Lloyd.
Mike, thank you very much, Dean, and congratulations on your 17 plus episodes, and we'll get it up to 20, 30, and 40 for you, I reckon, within the next 6 to 12 months. So, mate, it's been a heck of a ride in the last sort of 12 or 18 months, I think. But we can talk about that as we go through the session.
Mate, look, you and I have met in person a couple of times, but we've met digitally and online a couple of times as well. I suppose that's the way of the world in 2020. And when I first met you, I'd sort of had reasonable word that you were a pretty straight shooting sort of a bloke, a good bloke as things go. I met you and I've had no reason to challenge that initial perception. I don't think there's a huge amount that we disagree on. There are bits and pieces because otherwise we wouldn't be libertarians. But, mate, what brought you to the Liberal Democratic Party and what got you involved in the Liberty movement?
Mike, it's actually fairly easy from my perspective. I've never been in a political party before in my life until about 4 years ago when I joined the Liberal Democrats. So the Liberal Democrats, is my first and only political party. To give you a little bit of history, I'm the youngest of 6 out of a Scottish-Irish ancestry family of agriculture. So you look at me at sort of 61, white old bloke, and you think, oh well, he's an ultra conservative. But I think say that at your own peril. Look, I've had a lived experience with my mother having 6 kids under the age of 14. My father died, and we got hit with death duties. So Mum went from basically no debt on a relatively small property for where we were in Western Queensland to almost 95% debt overnight because of death duties. So that's always been burning in the back of my mind. I wasn't going to inherit anything, mate. I was number 6, so forget about. I felt I was entitled. No, I wasn't. I had to paddle my bloody own canoe. I knew that sort of as soon as I popped out. So the other thing that happened is when I sort of started my business about 12, 13 years ago, I unashamedly work with family and private businesses. I don't work with big corporations. I don't work in certain areas, and I certainly don't work under government contracts and that sort of stuff. It just doesn't interest me. It's a waste of bloody time and waste of taxpayers' money, quite frankly. Let's paddle our own boat.
To clarify, Lloyd, what sort of business are you in, or is that top secret?
No, not top secret at all. I don't have too many secrets. We're online, so I don't care. But no, mate, I'm a specialist in the family business area for family succession, but I'm not a solicitor or an accountant or a financial advisor. I'm a strategist by nature, and also by formal qualifications, as I am with a governance perspective. but I'm also a neuroscience practitioner in group dynamics. So that's sort of my area. So I do a lot at the front end of businesses, and I do a lot of embedding after what I call the professional services, which are really important people do their work, from taxation, legal, all that sort of stuff, wealth creation. So, and look, I deal with businesses from $2 million turnover to 750 to $1 billion worth of turnover in Australia and overseas. So, it's So, and about 5-6 years ago, I started to hear and see, things in the political field, and hearing things in the family business field that were really raised a bit of an ire for me. And if you think about our mantra at the Liberal Democrats, it can be as simple as leave me alone. It's as simple as that. Let's not get into the philosophical dynamics and whether you're a real libertarian or not a real libertarian, or no, we're the freedom fighters and all that sort of stuff. In Australia, we don't even know that our freedoms are disappearing. But I talk to multi-generations inside business, and some of those businesses can have 4 generations inside the family. And granddad or grandma and great-granddad or grandma say, when I started this business, or when I took over this business, I could make 30% net profit after tax. I'm seeing my son or grandson and his wife, or my granddaughter and her husband, bust their absolute buns to get 12-15% net profit before tax. Yeah. What the hell are we giving to the next generation? Now, when you start looking at businesses, and I look at a political party and I assess the political party scheme exactly the same way, is we shouldn't have egos, we should have a legacy, and family business has got legacy. So I started hearing this, and then I started hearing the political field. We know the Greens want a 70% debt duties. We know the unions are pushing. Now it's not on their websites anymore, ever since Bill Shorten cocked it up last year and actually said we're going to have a debt duties. Bingo! It went off the bloody union manifesto websites and all that sort of stuff. And they're saying no, there's no death tax. Absolute bollocks. It is. And if the Greens and the unions want it, the ALP will definitely put it in. Now, whether it's going to be a national death tax or a state-by-state death tax, I would argue it'll probably be a national death tax, because the minute a state puts that, private investment's going to go elsewhere in another state. So we started hearing that. Now, let's not let the coalition off the hook here either, because they're even being bloody sneakier about it than the Marxist authoritarian parties. The so-called blue authoritarian parties of the Nationals and the Liberal Party, and I would argue a few other minor parties as well. They call it a property tax. And when you delve into their manifestos and that sort of stuff, they're looking at it from an American perspective. So they'll actually look at sort of putting a property tax on. And I know in New South Wales there's a small one, but having more of an American side of it. But when you dig down into the fine print, they also talk about an additional tax on transfer. Now, mate, this will blow your mind, but KPMG did this a couple of years ago. There is $5.3 trillion, not billion, $trillion worth of wealth going to be transferred in the next 20 years in Australia alone. Now, if you start thinking about a transfer tax, when's most of that going to happen? On death.
On death, yeah, and that's a big part of the whole show. So I did a relatively recent interview with Adam Kokesh, a fairly prominent libertarian in the United States.
Yep.
And he and I did a breakdown of the which country is more communist, Australia or America. I think we ended up sneaking across the line with our gun laws, but one of the questions Adam asked was about a death tax, and what had eluded me, and in the heat of conversation, this is where people go, oh, well, you didn't say this at the time. It's like, well, nobody can remember everything at all time. Like, get real. But I'd forgotten about probate. probate is a form of death tax. Now, I experienced that when Dad passed away. And what the bloody hell? How are these bastards getting their claws into this? And it didn't occur to me during that interview. It was actually my mum who rang up, and she said, "You forgot about probate." And I went, "Oh yeah, good point." Mum's not a libertarian by nature; no. She really doesn't get it, but she did pick up on that concept. And mate, the fact that they want to steal from our generational families and our generational wealth actually overall makes the country a poorer nation for sure.
Look, it devastates. Because what it does is let's put things into two categories. You've got wealth creators, which is the private enterprise, the entrepreneurs, the startups, all that sort of stuff. Then you've got wealth consumers. The public sector is a wealth consumer, and of course, obviously, welfare consumes wealth, right?
Yeah.
So death duties or whatever you look, property tax, all these sorts of things are actually an attack on wealth production and wealth accumulation. Now, the other side of it is people go, oh, well, you've got to distribute. It's got to be fair. It's got to be fair. Well, I can tell you, if you actually understand what sustainability started off as, and lucky enough, I'm a little bit, I'm old enough to remember what it was. It was actually in 4 categories, and it was this in this chronological order. It was economic, financial, social, and environmental. And just to bore everyone with it, economic is understanding your economic environment, right? We're in a capital market-driven environment. We're lucky, we still are, I think. Then you've got finance. So you've actually got to be a viable financial manager so you can actually make a profit of it. When you do that, you can actually be socially outward going. Because if you're broke and you got the arse out of your strides, generally speaking, you tend not to go out and actually be a social contributor, do you? You hide. Whereas if it's a little bit like, what's the best form of welfare? A job.
Yep.
A job's the best form of welfare. Think about it as simple as that. Then the fourth bit is environmental, because if you can actually bring that down, if you're making money and you're contributing to society, you can also be a very good environmental custodian. And of course, what the wokey authoritarians have gone and done is that if you're not a hairy armpitted tree bloody hugging koala lover, then you're a social pariah. Well, sorry guys, you've got it arse about face, and it's about time somebody actually started to break this bloody narrative. And I think the Liberal Democrats are the only ones that can actually do it, because the rest are, they love the authoritarian bit, whereas it's abhorrent to us. So
I actually agree with you. And mate, look, regarding the environmental stuff, by nature, libertarians are really, really good at looking after the environment around them, because, and it's argued we're selfish. Well, we're not selfish, but I can't help a poor person if I'm broke.
Exactly.
I can't grow my own vegetables and not use a supermarket unless I look after my little property here and get it sustainable and growing and well managed and all those sort of things. And the same applies across the board. Unfortunately, there seems to be this delusion that, well, you're selfish, so you're not giving to everybody else. Well, hang on, what are you contributing to make that work?
And
we come from a place of giving to get, whereas they come from a place of, well, to make it fair, you should just give. And that, to me, doesn't balance out.
And I'd like to turn that on its head. Australia is technically a sport. We call ourselves a sports mad country, don't we? Right? You use the word selfish. A really good sportsman has to be really, really, really selfish, even to be a good team player. Right? Now you think about it. You think about it. You get your ruckman and all that sort of stuff in AFL. If they sit there going, oh well, I don't really care whether I do a good job or not, bang, they're going to get bloody beaten 100 to nil immediately, aren't they? So these are the sorts of things you got to look at. This stupidity about, oh, you're selfish. Well, hang on. People, generally speaking, aren't selfish because of themselves. They're actually selfish because they want to do better for their family, their community, and all that sort of stuff. You know, that's why people tend to be selfish, because you look at the people that say they're not selfish, they're probably the most.
The hands. I mean, you look at somebody like Michael Jordan's a great example. You know, he was considered in many circles to be a really selfish basketball player.
Yep.
Yet you look at his single-handedly lifted Chicago up in so many ways by being or having the standards as high as what he did. His teammates all had to lift up or go.
Yep.
So everybody gets better around him. They had no choice because he wasn't accepting anything less. And then the financial, well, how can he make this much money? But he also employs, I think that last count, it was 2 million people or something that he are employed sort of directly out from him. And that's where I think they get really, really confused. But, I mean, look, so that's the general philosophy where libertarians come from. I think true libertarianism is a bit of a fallacy, because part of it is we have to accept other people's nuance. That's part of it. You and I are very different, but in many ways we share some philosophies, and I think that's important.
Exactly.
Mate, Liberal Democrats. Let's start there. Let's start there. You've become the president after some tumultuous years. We had Gabe Buckley was the national president for many years, with an interesting reign. Obviously, there was the Lionhelm stuff, who was undoubtedly the king of the libertarian castle in Australia for a period of time. He didn't get re-elected. Gabe finished a 4-year term. Andrew Cooper took over and sort of essentially, I guess, was a good stabilising factor for 12 months. Mate, how did that journey evolve for you? Because I was sort of on the peripheral, but I wasn't right in the middle of the national executive. I've always stayed a bit clear of the national executive. Yeah,
look, when Gabe stepped down, I was approached to fill the temporary position, which I did in August last year. And look, Gabe was trying to start it as well, is sort of start that shift of sort of having the executive do executive stuff. Now Coops came in and he looked at it from almost like saying, well, we've got to try and corporatise the organisation a little bit to make it attractive, for external people and a wider set of voting and that sort of stuff. Now, look, I subscribe to that. I'm a great believer in, we've got to grow. We've got to grow the organisation from a 1.5%, party of annoyance to a 5 or 6% party of influence, and that sort of thing. So, and it's our time to do that. It is our time to do that. So, look, Coops had a darn hard year. He had 3 treasurers. He had at least 2 secretaries. He had, a lot of people sort of, had been on there for a long time, and they moved on. There was some health issues, and sadly, we lost Anne Kerr, who I thought was, just a brilliant person. And anyway, so I sort of looked at it and said, well, it's any change causes disruption, and if you want to use an old analogy that some people may or may not have heard, is you can't make an omelette without cracking the odd egg, so to use a chef situation, but it's the reality of it, and there's 3 things that we've got to think of that make a party, that make a party or anything run. And it's as simple as what we're using now as the 3M framework is members, members, money, and media, and members are not only members inside the party. They are potential candidates. They are advocates. They are they're our elected members and all that sort of stuff. So once I sort of started looking at that, I thought, no, I will re-stand, and if I'm lucky enough to, for the members to elect me, I will, and I will put my hat in the ring for the president's role. And lucky enough, I was elected on in Perth, and the 9, of which there's technically 7 of us that are new to the whole national executive sort of scene, myself included, and for their grace and support, I took over the president's role. And look, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, because we really had to look at the baseline fundamentals of the organisation. We had to look at, leveraging all the good work that's been done over 20 years. There's been a hell of a lot of, work from the founders of, John and, John Humphreys and all those guys, and the really good work that Clinton Mead did as a mayor in Sydney, and then in New South Wales, and then David Lineholme, he did put us on the map, and he also drove, some didn't like it, some did. He drove things so well that we did get people in the other states. Now, when you start looking at where we've moved to, it's a darn team effort. We've got some pretty good, people on the national executive, and we've got Stewie Hatch, got a promotion, and he's in the, like a lot of our party members, they're right in the core of their productive years. It's sort of the 40 to 55 bracket, and so he dropped off, and Bede Mudger's coming in just in a temporary role. So we've got a heck of a lot of good skills. We've made some pretty hard decisions to improve the persona of our social media and all that sort of stuff. We've made some hard decisions there. We've made some hard decisions to relinquish what people saw as control. The states are fairly autonomous, and we're really promoting that to get ready for an evolution of the organisation. Is there some bumps in the road? Heck yeah, there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road. Has there been a few bumps? Yeah, we've hit a few rough gullies in the last sort of 7 or 8 months. But what we have done is we've invested in the company, in the organisation, and we've not only invested in the party, we've also invested in the limited company that we've got, that's a service company, and we've done that by putting an outsider, a non-party member, in as our executive officer with Catherine Falconer, and the work she's done in 2.5 months is absolutely phenomenal. And now on the 1st of November, Rob McCarthy is actually a full-time employee of the company as well. We've got Danielle still, in there doing some stuff. So we've sort of got, basically 2.5 FTE. Now, their role is going to be driving income earning. So yes, they're going to be driving membership, but they're going back to the second M as well of membership and that sort of stuff. They'll be overseeing the media bit, but a lot of the media is going to be leveraging our good work that our 3 MLCs are doing. And let's not underestimate what just happened in Victoria in the local election, with getting 2 people elected to regional councils, and missing a seat in the Melbourne City Council by 80 primary votes. Now that's a pretty big achievement, and the Victorian guys have got to pat themselves on the back, because via certain things that occurred even at the national executive level, we flushed out some pretty interesting candidates late in the field, late in the process, and yep, and I think from that we've actually got a little cohort that we can start looking at. Will they actually stand as candidates for the Victorian state election or the national election? So there's a heck of a lot on. I hope the monthly newsletter from the monthly president's sort of email that goes out to all members has kept people informed in what's going on, and sort of shows that there is a different, a different focus And the other focus that we really want to highlight is the fact that the national executive is the administrative arm, as the state executives are, as the administrative arm of the organisation. And we need the political arm to be interlocked, but a soft separation. So there's not the, okay, if I'm on the executive, then I'm guaranteed a spot. No. Yeah. Let's be administrators, and that's where I sit. That's where nearly everyone on the national executive sits at the moment. So that's a monumental shift inside the organisation. So is there more work to do? Oh, heck yeah, mate. We're probably only 15-20% of the way. But we'll get there because I think it's our time, and the COVID restrictions have shown that it is our time, because realistically we are the only political party that's actually about liberty. The rest are about totalitarianism and authoritarianism.
They like to argue over which areas of government should control our lives, not necessarily that no areas of government should control our lives. Whereas we sort of are more of the opinion that government is here simply to facilitate the things that we as individuals cannot do for ourselves. That's the only justifiable role for government, as far as I'm concerned, is you're here really just to facilitate anything that we as individuals can't manage on our own. And there's a very, very small list when you get serious about it.
Absolutely. At the federal level, it's looking after our external borders. Looking after our external borders and basically our biosecurity. Yep. Not a lot else when you think about it. At the state level, look after the police force, the education system, and the health system, and bugger off out of everything else.
And look, it's even arguable how poor a job they're doing with the police system after what we've seen down in Melbourne recently, and the education system. Well, it's arguable that 80% of that could be replaced by bloody YouTube classes, to be perfectly honest with you. Get somebody like Jeffrey Tucker who does a class a week, and you just put 1,000 kids, right? Watch Professor Tucker tell us what's what, or whatever the case may be, Yep. That would be one way I'd look at tackling that. But mate, look, I tell you, I was really, really impressed with how many candidates sort of came out of the woodwork for the Victorian elections. Obviously, it does help having a couple of MLCs down there, and David and Tim have been doing an excellent job. There's for all of our little differences and quirks and whatever. Overall, I love that they've been so committed to being anti-lockdown and anti-carry on. I was like a proud dad watching Dave Limbrick get arrested the other week. Yep. I know that sort of sounds It sounds a bit counterproductive if you're a bit of a normie on the outside looking in, but for me, it just showed that level of commitment to go out there, put yourself amongst the people, which is what our politicians should be doing, and actually being on the wrong side of the totalitarian argument. So I've really got to commend both those blokes. They're both good guys. I've met them, they're
Yep.
great guys. But, yeah, you sort of look at that and you just sort of go, well done. But to see so many new candidates come out, I've been around the party 5-6 years now, I think, and there's just names rolling out left, right and centre who I'd never heard of, no idea who they are. Paul Silverberg and I connected recently for a little side program on here. I just to try and help a few guys create a bit of content that they can share or whatever they can do, and help some guys get a bit comfortable in front of a camera, because like it or not, that's the world we live in if you're going to be involved in the front end of politics. And, mate, there are some really great people who are sitting there going, I didn't realise a Libertarian Party existed, but I want in. And that for me it means we are doing some really good work. We've got to be. It's the only way it happens.
Yeah, and look, let's look at all the work that and let's focus on Victoria at the moment, because I think then we can sort of replicate that, especially into New South Wales and WA. That have a look at what Tim and David have been doing ever since the COVID stuff started. I know we're biased. We're LDP. We're LDP party people, but they're showing, and they have shown, that they're actually the only adults in the bloody kindergarten. They really are, and and they've both got very different styles. One's in the middle of a city and one's up on the border regions. So they've got to have different styles. But they've been lockstep in their unwavering focus of the fact that, hang on, if we're talking about science and all that sort of stuff, then let's use the science for everything. Don't be cherry picking it to impose a political will and all that sort of stuff. And look, we saw David get arrested there the other day, but you've got to go back to the fact that, he went to the Black Lives Matter, protest just to see what was going on. And then when he stood up in Parliament yesterday and the day before and actually outlined the hypocrisy of how those two so-called protests or gatherings, were treated not only by the media, but by the police, obviously under the direction of the government and all that sort of stuff. The hypocrisy now it's there for everyone to see. It is absolutely there for everyone to see that COVID has been weaponized from a political perspective at the detriment to the real people that are vulnerable. And I'm talking, the aged, the aged and the immune compromised and the ill and that sort of stuff. And that's been the Liberal Democrats' focus, whether we've been the politicians or right across the different executives and states and that sort of stuff. We have been lockstep in that thing is, hold on, guys, you've got limited resources here. You've got limited resources, use them wisely, protect and monitor the vulnerable and the movement and let the economy go. No, what did they do? They actually had an open attack on the private market-driven economy and have absolutely bloated the public sector. That is completely unsustainable and should be called out. And what David and Tim are doing especially is calling it right out. But let's not underestimate what Aaron's been doing in WA either. He's behind the scenes been forcing the government over there, the state government over there, to table their science on the continued lockdown and the need for the fortnightly, every time you move into the state, a fortnightly sit in a motel room and all that sort of stuff. We've been doing it up here in Queensland. I know New South Wales is a different animal, but up here in Queensland, we've been writing, to the ministers and the shadow ministers and the shadow, and all that sort of stuff. Crickets, they don't care, mate. And I know national politicians have actually been writing to the state politicians as well and have actually been getting the fob off. So, it really is an up you, the general public. We're going to do what we want. Now, mate, that's shifting authoritarianism in a very dangerous position. And again, it's only the Liberal Democrats that seems to be wanting to call it out.
Mate, yeah, there is. I saw Pauline today called out the Great Reset and the notion of rejecting it, which obviously I would applaud because I can't stand any of this globalist, let's make everything socialist and we're all going to work under one world government. And like it or not, they're admitting it fairly publicly now that that's what they're aiming for. We're all going to come under the UN banner and do as we're told. And that'll be over my dead body, which I'm sure that won't bother them too much. But I see a lot of this stuff, mate. I see there was the minister down in Melbourne, I think the Labor Party minister, talking about how we needed to submit to the one world government and let China lead it. And then there was the Chinese fellow or Chinese backgrounded fellow for the Liberal Party up in Queensland running a campaign basically saying, yeah, come on, let's jump over here. We'll all vote for me in Australia and we can be China 2.0. Mate, both sides of the big parties seem to be heading down this path, which I made it fairly publicly how I feel about both lots of them. I've never been shy. Mate, what's your take on it? How you're a little more PC than I am?
Oh, look. Let's get to the actual fundamentals of what the UN is all about at the moment. It's actually about authoritarian / cultural Marxism / total control, domiciled to a few. That's all it is. So it's technically a communist style, dictatorship committee, if you think about it. But it's also about stripping away property rights and distribution of wealth. Now, but it's also full of hypocrisy. If they were fair dinkum, if the UN was fair dinkum about distributing wealth, mate, the first thing you'd disband is one of the only two real cartels in the world, and that's called OPEC. You know, that's the first thing. That's the first thing. If the UN was fair dinkum about distributing wealth, you would get rid of OPEC straight away. Now, and that's the oil producing nations, right? Because, you know, to give you a little bit of an idea, Kuwait alone produces about the same amount of LNG, so liquefied natural gas, as what we do here in Queensland. They get around about $800 billion of money kept inside Kuwait from that volume. We get less than 80 million.
Right, okay.
Right? So think about it like that. Now, that says that they're bloody a lot smarter than what we are, but they've also got a bloody sight more wealth to distribute than what we have anyway. But the UN isn't even thinking about that. They've also got very, very, very poor bloody human rights in the Middle Eastern countries and all that sort of stuff. You mentioned China. It's a really interesting one. You know, I don't subscribe to the to the China look out, they're going to take over the world thing. What I don't want is a Chinese style government or a communist government inside Australia, right? That's what I don't want. Australia has had foreign investment forever in that sort of stuff. Now, I've spoken to Chinese businessmen in Australia and Queensland and that sort of stuff, and they say, listen, have a think about it this way. China could drop 50 million people in Australia overnight, and they've still got to feed 1.2 billion of them in their own country. Who really has the problem, right? Who really has the problem? The problem is the infiltration of that money and that type of government system into our government system, right? So, so I like to separate the two. Yeah, I like to separate the two. There's the politics and the government control and the style of government, or there's the private investment.
Yeah.
Now, when we blend the two, we have this nationalist versus globalist argument. That's actually counterproductive. To me, that's counterproductive. You've got to split it out. It's if we put it to the libertarian bit, it would go, no, Dean, I'm a more libertarian person than you are. No, Fred down the road, I'm a true libertarian. You're not.
Yeah.
Oh, grow up and get over yourself, you know? Now, the people that do that obviously don't have a bloody argument, and they've got the bandwidth of a bloody micron. You know, it's dumb. And I think this, you know, the whole Australian, you know, the whole foreign investment stuff. You know, am I concerned about the One Belt, One Road? Yes, I am, because it's 90% politics, 10% trade.
Yeah.
Right. At the thrust, at the cut and thrust of it, that's what it is. People, you know, some people that are easily influenced, and you know, we've heard it inside our own organisation. You know, they go, "Oh, libertarians, China, wee!" You know, they're the ones that say that publicly, and yet they're also the same people that are probably very easily influenced by academic documents and that sort of stuff. And they say, no, the Belt and Road thing is purely just an agreement. Yeah, it is. It is at the face value of it.
Yeah.
Tell you from doing business in China, if you want to compare Japan and China, When you do negotiations for a contract in Japan, and the minute you sign that contract in Japan, you have jumped through all of the hoops and you have signed a contract, and they will make you stick to that contract or die and perish. Behind the scenes, they will stick to that contract and die or perish and save face as well.
Yep.
Now, I'm old enough to have seen that in the investment thing from 1978 through to 1985. China, on the other hand, do exactly the same thing as the Japanese and various other people do. They hold you out, make you jump through hoops until you sign a contract. The difference is when you sign a contract in China with a Chinese business, you have then achieved a memorandum of understanding to do some type of business under some type of condition at some time in the future. Your work has only just started. And the Belt and Road is exactly the same thing as that. You know, what do they need the Belt and Road for? Mate, they've got 1.3 billion people there. They've got to feed them. You know, something like 70 different dialects and all that sort of stuff. They're doing that to control, you know, their own civil unrest and all that sort of stuff out there. So, which is why it's 90% political.
Yeah,
it's
for sure. My question with that usually comes back to why is a federal government, like as in China, doing deals with state governments? The two, you know, that's the equivalent of me doing a personal deal with, you know, the head of North Korea for land in Australia. I'm a member of the Liberal Democrats. I've just done this deal. The playing field's very different, you know, like fair enough. Presidents or prime ministers or the heads of countries or nations do deals. One nation doing a deal with the state of another country without the benefit of the other country seems pretty subversive at the very least. And there's a layer of dishonesty there.
And do you know why they do that, Dan?
Well, it wouldn't be the old divide and conquer by any chance, but
well, yeah, there's a little bit of that. You've got to remember, what does the federal government control and what does the state government and local governments control? Do not underestimate the infiltration into local government and all that sort of stuff. The Greens are a classic example about it, and they are subservient to that whole UN, you know, and the Green New Deal, right? I'm going to take the local councils. Local councils are the ones that do zoning on land for development and issue development approvals. State government owns your resources. Federal government doesn't. So state government owns the land that you grow your agriculture on, and which means they then do your vegetation management, they do water management, they do resources under the ground, so that's water and minerals and gas and all that. State governments own that, and they are the primary bedrock. So people go, why is you know, foreign investors? And I'm not only going to target China here because it's being done from Canada, it's being done from Great Britain, it's been done from Germany, it's been done from the US. They do as many deals or more with local and state than what they do with the federal. Yes, FIRB, Foreign Investment Review Board, has to approve it. But there's limits on that. And the amount of inflow of money that are under those limits would bloody blow your mind, mate, I can tell you. You know, on business visas and all that. But it comes down to what is the decision, where are decisions made on particular things? And state government, all decisions are made at state level eventually on mining, resources, agriculture, vegetation management, land distribution, purchase of national parks, where easements and all that can go. And then the other one with property development is your local government. Federal government have got nothing to do with that.
Yeah,
right? That's why and you know, these guys play the long game, mate. You know, China plays, and I'm not going to go into it in this episode here, but China does either seven different things over a 35-year period, a new segment every 5 years. or they do 5 things on a 7-year basis. It's still a 35-year process. Why is it a 35-year process? Because generally speaking, a generation is 25 years, so you're almost one and a half generations. Most of us have forgotten what happened 25 years ago.
Yep.
And I can give you examples of that overseas, where I've dealt with family businesses, but I can do that offline because some of that might be a little touch confronting for people. Let's say that might be a bit confronting for people. So, but coming back to your original question, let's understand it's the political interference that we've got to be careful of. The investment bit is just purely investment, mate. But understand that there's a link at both ends. Yeah.
Of course. Now, the next question, I guess, would be relative to that. What about water allotments, water ownership? Now, there's a fair question that China and America and a few other countries have massive amounts of Australian water that they allegedly own. The question that I have, one, should they be allowed to own our water when we've got farmers who can't get any? And obviously we all know that the Murray-Darling Basin Plan is a complete cluster.
It certainly is a complete cluster, fiddly bit. So now the answer is, mate, is let's go back to why water rights were separated from the land, is to commoditize something.
Yeah.
Now, you can have all the land and all the resources and all the other stuff, but if you do not have water, you have not got a community. So the biggest issue, and it's the UN that wanted water rights separated, because once you control water rights, you actually control the community. Right?
Of course.
Now, water rights actually separated the single biggest competitive advantage of a property right that you had. So water rights, separating water rights was actually an attack on property rights. Do I agree with it? At the moment, it's a commodity and you've got to let the market run, right? But it was a bad government policy, which so many are, that they're just bloody poor government policies, that has actually cocked it up. Now, landowners were very, very, very good water managers until we separated water licenses.
Yep.
And then they said, well, if I've got to commoditize this, I have got to get a 100%, I've got to get a return out of this. Now, if my land is worth X and I can only get a 2 or 3% return out of it, and I've got to buy water at $250 a megalitre, I have to make sure that if I pump, and I use 250 for various reasons, if I pump 4 megalitres onto this crop, that's per hectare. That's $1,000 a hectare of water only.
Yep.
So I have to make sure that I can increase my productivity by putting that $1,000 on the hectare. I've got to increase that productivity by $2,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
Or $1,100. Only you get a 10% extra net return. Now, if I don't, then I go broke. Then I can't produce food. I can't produce a wine or whatever, or I can't produce a fibre. Now, once you start doing that, you've actually gone and put a selfishness or a financial consideration into the environmental flow by that person.
Yeah.
Whereas they had the choice of building a reservoir and holding that water and keeping it topped up and continuing allow that water to flow through whenever there was an abundance of water. Not now. They're saying, I've got an abundance of water, I've got to grab every single bit of it I possibly can because I know the government is going to charge me an absolute fortune when it's an average or a below average year. Now, in agriculture, you use what is commonly known the 3-4-3, right, over 10 years. Well, 30%, 40%, 30%. You have 30% good years. You have 40% fluctuation between 20% above and 20% below, and you have 30% of absolute shit years.
Yep.
When you think about it from a financial perspective, you're going to make a pretty good dollar in 30% of the times. You're going to either lose or break even or make a dollar in 40% of the time, and you're going to be your ass at 30% of the time. Right? This is why the separation of water has actually been detrimental to agriculture. It's been detrimental to regional communities, and it has been detrimental, especially to the Murray-Darling system. It has been an absolute catastrophe to the Murray-Darling system, because and I'm going to use Cubby Station here. If Cubby Station could actually just harvest.
For those that don't know, Cubby Station's one of the biggest properties in Australia. So
yeah, it's the biggest irrigation area. The development on Cubby Station has been a reaction and a focus on managing the cycle of 30, 40, 30 inside poor government policy. If they would probably have, I would argue, you could actually grow the same amount of cotton and have the same thing on about 60% of the reservoir of water if they still held their water rights inside their property and were allowed to harvest on their own, environmental and management needs.
On their own terms.
That's what it has done. And so, David Leyonhjelm started to lift the veil on this. Darren de Bortley has done a heap of work as well. Sadly, David didn't continue because, I think if you spoke privately to David, his work in the Murray-Darling, he'd only just opened the lid on it, lifted the veil, and there was a lot more to do. So, so I suppose that's a long-winded way of talking about that water rates, but you are talking about, to somebody who I suppose comes from those areas as well. And without water, you don't have regional development. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. No water, no population, no communities, no regional development.
Mate, and, look, I spent a bit of time with Darren de Bortley right around Eden Monero. So I'm a country boy, and I had a vague idea about the old Murray-Darling, but it wasn't something that I'd ever got right into. So I don't know about you, but when I don't know much about something, I reach out to the people who do. Darren was one of them. I spent about 3-4 hours on the phone to Darren. I spent some time talking to one of our other regular guests for season 2, Topher Field. He's right in on the project. Yep. And then as far as the David stuff went, obviously I have a fair bit of access to a lot of David's old material through my period with the LDP to sort of formulate the policy that we did and tackle it in the way we tried to sort of manage it. So, mate, I think that's a huge disaster and another example of why governments really should be running very, very little. Mate, The other thing you brought up as well was regarding councils and how much authority they have. Now, do you buy the 2021 or Agenda 2120 word salad, Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 concepts? Have you looked into them? Have you become aware of them? A lady named Rosie Corey, she got stuck into what they're doing. They're certainly starting over in the US and Canada and there, and obviously it's rolling out over here because as far as I'm concerned, councils have far too much authority. What are your thoughts?
Look, no, I don't buy into it at all, purely for the reason it's actually about centralised control, authoritarianism, do as I say, not as I do, and destruction of private and individual property rights, there's 1,000 reasons why not. It's also the real insidious bit that I hate about Agenda 21 2030 is the actual education side of it, because they speak a really good game from an academic perspective and people can be lulled into it, but they are really about dumbing people down and ensuring that people are not critical thinkers. They're more rote learners and all that sort of stuff. And so, mate, no, I don't buy into it at all. And I don't buy into it from a nationalist perspective. I actually buy into it from a liberty perspective, a libertarian perspective, is bugger off. My local council can't even tell me what's good for me. So where on the bloody hell does the UN think they can do that from bloody sitting in some friggin' office somewhere, you know, a couple of thousand bloody kilometres away from me? Piss off, not even interested. And by the way, no one buys into it that has even any inkling of self-respect, self-responsibility and self-accountability. No, I don't buy into it at all.
Unelected bureaucrats ruling over us from Brussels via our local councils down here and onto the rest of the political class. I think I was talking to somebody the other day who there's even a constitutional argument that councils don't exist. When you say don't, can't, shouldn't, constitutionally, I think the Constitution allows for 2 layers of government. So pick your poison, people. We got 3. Which two do we want to keep?
Yeah, and you've raised a really good point there, because realistically, local governments are there at the behest of the state government.
Yep.
You know, so we really shouldn't even call them local government. We should actually call them local service providers, because that's really what they are. They are local service providers to look after the basic services, of urban land. Yes, they do have decision-making authority in zoning and property development and that sort of stuff as well. However, a state government can override that at any time as well. So, the old, rates, rates, roads, and rubbish. It's a little bit cliched and it's a little bit simplistic. However, that is their role. They are a delivery. They should be a delivery arm at the more micro level, at the behest of a state government, but they're not. They're being politicised, and they're wokey dokey sort of people. Now, there's the reason why, and this is not very well known right across Australia, but way back when John Howard, in the late 90s, John Howard basically handed over all national land ownership and land to the states. Now, while the federal government still owns some land, they don't have any ownership, any management or operational side. That's all at the state level. But the states have pushed down the operational biosecurity requirement of looking after noxious weeds, invasive weeds, feral pests and all that sort of stuff in certain areas under contract. And then the state government gives the local delivery agent money to do it. So basically, when it comes down to mismanagement of land, that then impinges on us. Now, whether that's at a reserve, roadside, all this sort of stuff. Because think about it. Your local shire council looks after your animal stuff, doesn't it? So if you've got a noisy animal or something, your pets and all that sort of stuff, you've got to have them registered. They also look after destruction of wild dogs and pigs and that sort of stuff, feral animals. That's their responsibility. But most of these things come out of state government land because that's their safe haven. And it's a little bit like Dracula being in charge of the blood bank. The blood bank is trying to produce, deliver a service here by looking after the feral animals and the invasive and noxious weeds and all that sort of stuff. But Dracula, the state government, is starving and influencing the level of priority. Now, and this can be a little bit of a segue if you wanted to, but in Queensland alone, you know who the biggest landowner is?
Well, do tell.
The state government. They actually own 33 million hectares of land in Queensland alone.
Yeah, right.
Now, that was written to us by the Leanne Enoch, was the environmental minister. I don't know what the new ministry is now. So when you start looking at that, most of that is actually on headwaters of waterways.
Yep.
If you think about that, then if they let all that go to crap, which is what they've done, and you look at it, you've got giant rat's tail, you've got giant rat's tail grass everywhere. You've got lantana. You've got something like 16 million hectares of lantana in Queensland alone. 14 million of that sitting on bloody state-owned land.
Yeah,
when
right.
when a fire goes through that, mate, it's like an explosive. It burns that easy. But so it's on waterways. What happens on waterways? Seeds get washed downstream, don't they? It's just unvetted. It's just unvetted. A continuation of all that. Anyway, so I got on my hobby horse there, which was sort of segued. But I suppose the point there is that the local government needs to strip out all this wokeness and this environmental stuff and all that sort of thing. They've got nothing to do with that. They are there as a delivery agent and a delivery service only. The rest of it should be cut out and thrown out of it. And that's probably in some things in New South Wales and Victoria, it's, the wokeness in some bloody regional councils in those states is, my God, it's 50, 60, 70% of what they do. And that's a waste of taxpayers' money, mate. That's a waste of taxpayers' money. The ratepayers, all the other things, our licence fees and all that, the money that goes from state governments into local councils. All that is rubbish. It should be put in the tip, and they should go back to what they're looking after. Look after their land. Look after the bloody services. The rates, the roads, the rubbish, and keep our the few parks and all that sort of stuff that they've got. The rest of it, not even worth bloody decoration on a bloody wedding cake, mate. Get rid of it,
mate. 100%. Now, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use that as our wrap up point for this week's episode, mainly because it looked like a perfect point to do so. So, thank you for that, Lloyd. What we might do, I'd love to have you back if we can arrange to catch up again next week.
Yep.
And do something similar, and we'll drag into, because there's a lot to talk about with the Liberal Democrats in 2020. Mate, is that all right with you?
Absolutely. There's a lot to talk about the Liberal Democrats from in 2020, what we've already done in 2020, but there's a heck of a lot coming up in 2021, and there's some big things in 2022 as well, with the federal election and the Victorian state election. So we've got local elections in New South Wales next year. We've got the WA state election next year, and then we've got a couple of biggies in as well. So mate, it was exciting 2020. It's even more exciting 21 and 22 and even 23. So more than happy to come back on, and you and I'll talk offline when we can book that.
Mate, yeah, for sure. That sounds really good. I usually find anything more than an hour and people start nodding off. It seems to be a bit of a sweet spot there. I suppose that's why primetime television only goes 30 minutes or 60 minutes, depending on how things go. Mate, I really appreciate your time. I do appreciate your work with the Liberal Democrats. I certainly see what you're trying to achieve at a national level. I'm happy to see so many new faces on the national executive. I you don't want to say got stale, but you could see factional stuff forming, and that's one area of libertarianism I can't stand. I can't stand it in the big parties. I don't want to see it in ours. We're all working for a common good of freedom and liberty for all.
Yep.
It sounds like something out of an American quote, the freedom and liberty for all. But that's what it's all about. And mate, I know the value and how hard it is donating your time. People forget all these are unpaid positions. People on these national executives, it's very easy to throw rocks at people who are doing things. It's very easy to throw rocks at our candidates. But what people don't understand is we don't have the money machine like the Libs or the Labor Party or even the Greens. What we have is people who generally self-fund. I know most of my campaign in Eden Monaro was self-funded with a little bit of top-up from great donations and a little bit of support for registration fees and things, but generally self-funded. I know you self-fund for all the work you do. I know a lot of people, past and present, within the party have self-funded or funded the party. I know guys who donate each week. I know guys who have, David Lionhelm single-handedly bankrolled the party for a long time, and and then obviously got elected, and there's a little bit of electoral money there. But in and overall, it's a self-funded operation. And on that spirit, I think it's important that we don't want to give our volunteers a free rein for when they do fail, but we also want them we want to accept the fact that they are doing this on their own time and on their own dollar, and that's a big bloody commitment that most people forget about when they're being armchair critics at home.
Yeah, mate, and look, it's a team. There's no I in team. There's 9 of us on the state executive, and we're sort of, I think we're all pretty rowing fairly hard and all in the right direction. But mate, there's some bloody good state executives and good branch conveners all around the country as well. And there's also as you said, it's the candidates. And we'll talk about the candidates in the next one, especially in WA. But there's the other thing that we've got to think of is when 75% of your membership is under 45 years of age, that's pretty darn exciting. That's pretty darn exciting. And the fish goes rotten from the head down, and I'm just part of the head. There's 9 of us at the head if you want to look at it. And hopefully our eyes are bright and looking. And the other side of it is our legacy is actually about bringing, this next generation cohort through, because we've got some darn powerful, people in that under 45 category, as can be seen just purely by the candidates that have run in previous elections, including yourself. What's in Victoria, and I know what the guys have done in WA as well. So, mate, I think our time's coming. I think our time has come. And what I've seen in the last sort of 6 to 12 months is there's a desire for people to actually have a bit of a go now. And if I can put that environment out there, then I think it's been a success. And that's where it is. It's about the legacy of what we've done in the last 20 years to set ourselves up for the next 20 years. So, well, thanks for having me on, and certainly good.
I look forward to catching up with you probably similar time next week. It'd probably be dynamite if you're available.
Mate, I'll have a look at the diary and we'll talk offline.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lloyd Russell, Liberal Democrats National President. Thank you very much for joining us. Righto, guys, back with us again, and we're happy to have him, as always, Resolute TV. One of my favourite people to talk to, not just online, but in person. I don't go much on his taste in football, but anyway, it is what it is. The indomitable Stephen Wells, author, troublemaker, conspirator. Is that a word now? Maybe have you been called that this week?
You get called lots of stuff. Yeah, what wouldn't be the worst thing I've ever been called?
And I tell you what, and I love it that people like you and a few of the other people we have on here who actually have some principles and stick to their guns that give me a little bit of hope for the future. Mate, what's going on with Uncle Donald?
Oh my God, let's get through it all. Democracy is dead. It's over. It's finished. We're done for. If Biden wins this election, or if this fraud is not prosecuted to the fullest, then the Western world is dead. End of story. Simple. It's gone. It's over. We're in a banana republic around the world. Can never trust an election result again. What has just happened in America is the most shocking thing in election history in the West, anywhere in the West. It is unbelievable that there are still people saying that this is a legitimate election. The deep state, the powers that be, the elite, they have gone full throttle on this right from the start of the polling that has been deliberately. It's not a mistake of the pollers. You can no longer say that the polling just makes a mistake. The polling has been deliberately done as part of an agenda to say that Biden was always ahead. That the polls were right all along, blah, 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 blah. The media has been completely and utterly infiltrated. They have been with it the whole way. They have been calling Biden out as winning before he was winning in states that hardly counted. They were holding off on giving results where Trump had clearly won. They are now covering up with the help of social media the big massive fraud that has gone on. It has been systematic from start to finish, from the polling before the election to the outright stealing of the election when it looked like Trump was going to win, basically stopping the vote count, all of a sudden finding, you know, ballots from all over the place that just so happened to be 100% for Biden. I mean, there are still people with such cognitive dissonance that they believe that 130,000 ballots for a state can suddenly turn up overnight after the counting stopped, and every single one of them can be for Joe Biden. There are still people believing that this is legitimate, and that's the saddest part of all. But we saw this with the COVID thing. There are people who just switch off their brains and won't accept reality. It's too traumatic for them. And I think the whole COVID thing gave the elite the confidence that they could pull this off and get away with it. And as long as they control social media, I mean, social media, Gab was shut down during the election. Don't know.
Oh, okay. I've never used Gab, so
I've just been, I only just started using Gab because I was put on another 30-day Facebook ban just before the election. But literally, accounts were being closed down left, right, and center. The president's account on Twitter was closed down for a period during the counting. Gab suddenly stopped working. It's just systematic end-to-end. The media coverage throughout the world showing Biden's path to victory when Trump was ahead. He was just, we were watching it unfold. Yeah, right in front of my eyes. I was watching the count go, and Trump was, you know, it started off with Biden doing better than Trump in certain areas, probably because of the legitimate mail-in ballots that were counted, or maybe some of those were illegitimate as well. You don't know now, but whatever the state of the original ballots that were mail-in votes that were counted on the day, Trump in every single state was catching up, then overtaking, and then going on to win in a beautiful mathematical curved trajectory that you would expect, where the percentage doesn't change throughout the day very much. You know, like you follow the trend, and so he was 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 votes ahead in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, he was catching up in Arizona. He was just winning, and I was on another show, and we all said, "Yeah, we're calling it. Trump's going to win. He's got the things." But when we were seeing that Trump already had like 250 electoral votes and was going on to probably get 300, the media was showing Trump as having less than 200 and Biden having 230. It was just crazy, man. And it's once this is over, it's as I said, democracy is gone, because nobody will ever trust an election result again. Nobody will ever. Everyone will. It's like, what's the point of voting if they can just fix it? Right. And we're in some dark times, I'm sad to say, but we are in some really dark times.
Mate, I sat there. I was glued to the TV. I made a couple of pre-election predictions that I thought it was going to be certainly far closer than the pre-media was carrying on. Oh, Trump's not going to have a hope in hell. And I guess where you and I differ is I like Trump better than Biden. I like nobody ruling over me better than either of them, if that makes sense. And I sit there and whether democracy is dead or not, depending on what we replace it with, I don't see it necessarily as a bad thing. And I know you'll sort of disagree, and that's fine. But the way democracy works currently is my gang is bigger than your gang. I have more supporters than you, so my 51%, as an example, gets to dictate to the other 49% what they're going to be doing for the next 4 years. And I think that's sort of a set up to fail kind of system. I mean, it's better than communism, of course. I'm not saying let's go to try that. But I sit there and I look at it in the current form of democracy, or what it's been the last few years, same as in Australian elections, where you've got, one group of dummies fighting with another group of dummies over who gets to rule over our lives, just does my head in. Like I used to think I was a bit more right leaning, and then when I was a kid, I was up for the worker. And as I've got older and I'm probably more jaded, I just look at it and go, can we collapse the whole system and start again with something a little less intrusive and overruling? I like Trump better than Biden, if I've got a choice. And there's another thing in the back of my head that I've sort of said to a few people, like, no. And that is the rise of China. It's this lunatic over there Jing Jong Pong or whatever his friggin' name is. I'm not even going to practice getting his name right because I really don't care. But he's one of the most ambitious blokes on planet Earth. He has got a big screaming army. He's got a massive population, and he would like to take just about everything. And one of the things that I think's kept him at bay or kept him a little bit calm is knowing that there's another lunatic in America who has more bombs, more guns, better trained population, and Trump's got the balls to use it. He's not going to capitulate to China's shit. So Biden in there, I think we're sort of almost signing on for our first woman president because, I don't know, what are they going to give him 3 months before Kamala Harris is in? Let's be fair. 3 months, maybe 6 tops. Oh, look, Joe's struggling with his health. We're going to have to retire his ass. By the way, we now have our first woman president. That's if Hillary doesn't bump off her and Nancy Pelosi and put herself in second so that when they retire him, she gets the job. You know, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, yeah, we'd all like to rule our lives, but you know, the point you made about China is the fact that, you know, when you don't group together and when you don't have a collective of like-minded people who you can stand with, then you're going to have some asshole with an army who's going to come over and say, well, I don't care what you want. You're my slave. You're my bitch. You'll do what I tell you, like it or not. And so, you know, Church, I think it was Churchill was quoted or misquoted as saying something along the lines of that democracy is the of all the systems in the world for one man to govern another, democracy is the worst, with the exception of every other system that's been tried.
Mate, 100%.
I
certainly don't disagree with you there.
So it's like, you know, okay, you know, if you don't like democracy, and I don't particularly, but then what do you replace it with? And that's where people come unstuck. But for better or worse, we've had a system that people, you know, whether they believed in it or not, they went along with it. And there wasn't a sense of being outright screwed over. Whereas what's happened just now is all the illusion of democracy, that you had a choice, that there was some influence that you could make, that is now gone. That is now gone. And the problem with taking away that illusion is that for the 50% Trump voters, or however many they are, or for anybody over here in Australia or New Zealand or in Queensland or any other election that's just gone to the left, and we're about to get the left pushing their totalitarian, one world government, globalist, you know, hold you down and force vaccine you type government, is that might have been going over as, oh yeah, okay, I'll go along with it because you know, the system or whatever. But that's now gone. You're going to have angry people. You're going to have people who are going to say, no, I ain't going to take this. And so I believe that this election steal, that is the start of the American Civil War. We're basically there now. If Trump does not win in the courts, if the courts do what they've just done over here for another thing, which is Clive Palmer, where we've got a corrupt high court who's basically said, your constitution isn't worth shit. Australia's constitution is worth shit. Therefore, McGowan can do what he likes, and Clive Palmer, you can pay up the bill. You can't move around as you thought you could. There are exceptions to the Constitution, even though the Constitution says that there shouldn't be any exceptions. It's. I had a
for 2 days on that.
If the judges are that corrupt in America, or if they bypass the court system or whatever, and they just declare him a winner, then a shitstorm is coming. And I don't mean everyone goes out and protest. I'm talking about there's going to be guns, there's going to be death, there's going to be, you know, there's going to be a real nasty, bloody civil war happening in America, and it's going to spread. And, you know, at the same time, we've got China sitting in the background for Australia, like you said, just waiting to go, great. Well, we already own half your land, so why don't we just send troops in to go and protect that land? And of course, Morrison has passed the law that said foreign troops are now allowed on Australian soil. So it's more likely that some traitorous politician is just going to invite them in.
Well, we all know how I think about fucking politicians. Most of them are traitorous, and most of them should be bloody strung up. I saw a meme the other day, mate. We haven't tarred and feathered our politicians for quite some time in our society. Maybe we need to bring a bit of that back because they get away with blue murder, these donkeys.
Tarring and feathering at the bare minimum. It's a bare minimum is to storm their offices, grab them out, strip them naked, instead of vaccinating them like they want to vaccinate us. Just dump them in a big pat of tar, pull them out, get the feathers, turn the fan on, and make them walk around and cluck.
And rightfully so too. Mate, they get no sympathy from me. And I've over the last 5 years, as you know, I've been pretty active in politics, and I've got to know quite a lot of the more Liberal Party type people than Labor Party. I don't know, they just tend to frequent similar circles. And I feel like they're pretty good people in theory, have a coffee, have a beer, have a whatever. But at the end of the day, they're fighting in the machine, for the machine, and the machine doesn't give a shit about the people. Whoever wins the US election, the people lose. They lose far bigger if Joe Biden wins, far bigger. I think the ramifications of a Joe Biden win will be far-reaching, and they're going to be felt for decades and decades to come. Short term, Trump's a far better solution. You only need 4 years out of him to at least try and keep everybody at bay. What's embarrassing to me is in 300 million people, these are the best two options to lead the planet. It's pretty terrifying, really. If that's the best we can come up with as a species, maybe we need to have a good hard look at ourselves.
Yeah, I don't know. I was what was the previous Libertarian candidate 4 years ago? I've forgotten his name.
Gary Johnson.
Gary Johnson. I was sort of rooting for him 4 years ago. This time, I've watched what Trump's done, and he's done a reasonable job, I think. And I don't take the criticism on board of him being a buffoon or the rest of it. I think he's been a pretty, as presidents go, if you hadn't had all of the media hype trashing him, he would have come across as a very decent president, I think. But at the end of the day, there was one promise that he hasn't kept, and until that promise is kept, or something like that promise is kept, then nothing else matters. And that was the one that really galvanized people, which was, if you're elected president, if I'm elected president, you'll be in jail. And that was the promise that he hadn't come through on. And that was the promise that probably needed to be kept more than any other, is that these swamp monsters needed to be in jail before this election. Now, on the upside of things, I'm hearing rumors going around, and I can't confirm them, that Trump has basically set up a sting operation in this election, and that all of these mail-in ballots.
The watermarking.
The watermarking, yeah. So,
I saw that.
If that gets pulled off, but I mean, I've seen so many claims from QAnon about, just hold the line, bide your time, trust the plan. I don't trust the plan. And even if it is true that they've watermarked this stuff, it's one thing to watermark this stuff. It's another thing to actually get enough people to give a shit about it. Because at the moment, if the Democrats and the deep state can lie about COVID and nobody give a shit, are outright open lies, if they can outright get away with open fraud, and the majority of people going, no fraud here, the memes going around, there's some fantastic memes of Joe Biden throwing a basketball, and then at the last minute it goes up and then goes across, just like the have you seen another one of the two having a pissing contest, and Joe Biden's both are arcing, and then the Joe Biden sort of gets all right angles at the last minute, or another one where the two of them go up together, and Trump's at the end trails off into the word fuck.
Oh, yeah. Mate, we're definitely heading for crazy times, mate. It's unbelievable to watch, really. And you're right, like the QAnon stuff. Now, I've seen some of their videos. Dia put me onto a documentary. I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, it was fucking great documentary, right? And I got right into it. I think it was 10 parts, 12 parts, whatever it was. the first few parts, and it went into Pizzagate, it went into all sorts of stuff, really well thought out. And you know, there was obviously the critique, well, they didn't put this in, and they didn't have, it's a documentary, how many things can you put in? You can't put everything into everything, it's not possible. But by the end of it, the last 2 episodes, I think it was, all of a sudden this QAnon documentary went from being fairly credible to gibbering shit about time travel and other nonsense. And I'm like, oh no, why? Why do you have to? You guys had some really credible stuff here that made a lot of sense. A lot of stuff that went, okay, I could see how that could play. I could see how that worked. And then you start gibbering shit about time travel and how JFK Jr. is hiding in the stands and ready to come back on behalf of his father and exact revenge. And you've turned it from being a really credible process, you know, with well thought out, well tackled, and then you turned it into a fucking sci-fi movie.
Yeah, and that then makes you wonder whether this whole QAnon thing is just a controlled opposition outlet where you suck people in, you get people hoping, and you get people relying on the plan and not getting off their arse and doing something themselves. So I love the idea of the fact that Trump was there to, and this is how they portrayed him. He's there to drain the swamp. He's going to get rid of the deep state. He's going to overthrow, you know, all the lunatics, remove the Hillarys, remove the Epsteins, remove the, you know, all these completely corrupt entities. And we know they're all corrupt. I don't care if you vote Democrat or Republican. I mean, all libertarians know that the whole thing's corrupt. But we all know. I don't think there's even that many Democrats that could, in good faith and conscience, although we know that sometimes those type of people make stuff up as they go along. But I don't. If you sat down and had a conversation with somebody about all these things around Benghazi and stuff like that, they couldn't, in good conscience, say, "Oh, yeah, well, you know, like, okay, maybe she is a bit fucking chunky." You know, I'm sure they could do it. Yeah, well, you know, you haven't obviously been debating these fuckers. They're, you know,
no, I'm talking about the ones that you sit with in person. Online, I debate them all day, and you get no sense out of them at all. But relative to people who loves it, you know, oh, Hillary's a nice old lady. No, she's not. She's corrupt. You know, this, and this.
No, the cognitive dissonance goes out into the real world too. I've got enough people at work who are just, you know, glazed over as far as that's concerned. They don't have a good conscience. All they have is their team. They're going to support it no matter what. They're going to turn a blind eye to whatever that goes on, and they're going to project all of the failings on all of the corruption on their side onto the other bloke. And that's all that they do. And look.
Well, that's the other worst part of democracy, mate. So you've got the Trump guys who go, no, Joe Biden's the shittest ever. And it wouldn't matter if Joe Biden put up a good policy. The Trump supporters would be, that's a shit policy, and vice versa. Anything Trump does is wrong. I mean, let's be fair. Trump could cure cancer tomorrow, and these fuckers would turn around and go, oh, well, we're cheering for cancer now. We want cancer to win. We can't have Trump curing cancer. What a bastard. Why is he such a racist to cancer? You know, and you can see it happening because they're just deluded lunatics. But why as a species, as a group, and I reckon you'd have a fairly good thought process on this because I like how your brain works. You
like how my brain works?
What brain's working? How in the hell are we in such a state whereby it's your team versus my team, as opposed to I've got a really good idea, I think this could work as a society. Let's give it a crack for 4 years, and if it doesn't work, Obamacare. Okay, it might have been a good idea on paper, was a disaster in reality. Okay, it didn't work. Let's change it back. What stops people from sort of actually going, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try something different. And it doesn't matter who comes up with a good idea. I've been in business. If somebody has a really good idea, I can give a rat's ass who come up with the idea. And I'm not going, yeah, well, you had a great idea, but you're a Republican. I'm going to do the opposite. It's like, oh, well, did it work? Did it serve the people better? Did it get a result? Then I want to do it. You know, like what's making people this incompetent?
Basically, because we're all tribal. We are genetically tribal people, and that's probably one of the biggest lies that have been sold to us by the globalists, that we're all one humanity. We're not. We've always been tribal. Race has always mattered. You know, nations, if you look back through, they grow out of an extended family, basically, and you look after your family. And so what we've got in the current situation is that we know no nation, there are very few nations left now that are one extended family. You can look at, say, Japan. There's probably the closest to it, where you've got, a group of basically ethnically and religiously and culturally homogenous people. And so the tensions within that society are much less because people have an affinity for one another that is just, it's genetic. And I don't mean genetic in that they are all Japanese. I mean genetic to humanity and genetic to all species, to be honest with you, whether you're talking monks, apes, lions, or whatever. Evolution, or the theory of evolution, because I'm not going to get into that bloody debate with creationists, but the theory of evolution it works on a level that to survive, you basically have to look after your own first. And so we've all got that within us. And the biggest lie that's probably been sold to us, especially when it comes to immigration and stuff, is that we can all be different and all live together. No, we can't. We can all be different and live separately from one another and occasionally trade. We can do that. Yeah. But if you want to lump us all into one big blob of a group, then compromises are going to be necessary. And the more compromises that you have to make, the less you want to compromise. The more you are told you need to be tolerant, the less tolerant you will become. And so we've been fed this lie. And at the moment, in Britain, you're seeing it. In Europe, you're really seeing it, where immigration is just now causing all these problems. And all of the predictions of Enoch Powell, who was demonized at the time, are coming true. And it's not because the majority of people are intolerant. It's because if you get enough different groups together, then a large enough minority will start butting heads with another large enough minority, and that's going to drag everybody else in with it. You're not going to see that happening in Japan. You're not going to, and someone brought out a point to me the other day that the only way that you can actually make a culturally diverse society function is the more culturally diverse it is, the more totalitarian the government has to become to control it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes logical sense too.
So we look at, like, say, Singapore and how authoritarian the Singaporean government is, and it's got 3 different groups. And it's only a little small place as well. But you can look back further into the Balkans, for example, before the 1990 war, when communism was in place. All of that ethnic rivalry was kept in check by a brutal, ruthless, authoritarian communist government. As soon as that lifted up, and then all of these ethnic tensions that had been brewing since 1800 and the original Habsburg Empire deciding that it was good to mix everybody together, 200 years later, and that still broke out into genocide and all kinds of stuff, because, people want to live with their family, people want to live with their group, and they don't want to compromise beyond a certain point. And so that's why. So then when we get back to the original point about democracy, democracy only works in a homogeneous group when the differences are small and you're trying to resolve small problems. But when you're trying to resolve, differences in race and differences in religion and differences in culture and differences in philosophy, if the differences become too great, then democracy is going to fail every time.
Yeah, no, look, mate, I agree with you on 80% of that, 90% of that as an analysis. I think that's pretty well where we're headed, and it worries me in the context of what the hell's the next 10 years going to bring, regardless of whether. I mean, I think Trump will fight it in court. I'm sure he will. But what outcome? What outcome? Yeah, how far is the deep state? If he was going to get rid of him, he needed to have done it in the last 4 years, and he clearly hasn't done it.
I mean, look, Clive Palmer fought it in court, and he had a watertight case, but he's lost. So,
mate, I got onto a thread, and what it's like online. Sometimes you get into these threads. I get into like The Age and newspapers that are naturally leaning opposite to the way I lean, and I just throw out a little barb yesterday about one of the lockdowns. They were criticising cafe owners who are allowing their staff to work without masks, and why should we support these people who are going to kill us all, and all this nonsense anyway. So I took a couple of shots. So listen, COVID's nowhere near as deadly as you make out. It's a thing, yes, But no, not to the extremity that you paranoid lunatics are making it out to be. Stop it. Just stop it. Don't overcook it. You're just going to kill us all. It's like, oh, fuck. This is right. Man, look, now you wrote a book on climate change. We all know that the world's going to end soon and all the islands are going to be overrun with water. How about we just put out an offer now? Anyone who owns a couple of islands and is worried that climate change is going to flood the islands, hand them over to you and I. We'll build new societies on these islands. It doesn't matter. It'll only be a 10-year experiment. We'll all be dead anyway. And we'll go and hang out on these islands. They can give them to us for nothing, so they don't have to worry about owning these islands anymore, clearly, because they're all going to die and get flooded with water and climate change. And you and I, we can just go and start some sensible societies on little islands and build some self-reliant little joints and go, yeah, sorry, leave us alone. Thank you. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, it sounds a bit too logical and sensible to ever actually be allowed.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the agenda is that we're supposed to become slaves, and you know, the whole point of what they're doing is that they want they get off on power, they get off on corruption, they get off on ruling us with an iron thumb and making us do whatever they want us to do. So we're talking about psychopaths here who run the world. People who have no interest in us separating from them. They want to dominate, they want to rule, they want to own, they want to oppress, and we should all just be good little sheep and be led to the slaughter whenever they feel like feasting adrenochrome from us. So,
yes, adrenochrome. I was reading about that the other week. Isn't that an inspiring little topic?
Yeah, and if Hunter Biden's laptop and some of the sick shit that's on there doesn't stop somebody being taken down as a presidential candidate, and doesn't get him and his family immediately arrested, then what will?
Well, man, no, nothing in 2020.
Yeah. So I mean, we've still got, in Australia, we've still got the suppression order on the
99 years, yeah.
99 years
I've actually been reaching out to the senator who what's the word, who sort of exposed a lot of that in one of those videos going around and was pretty pissed off about the whole thing. And I know his brother. I've been going, mate, can you get me a hookup with it? Will he talk to me? Will he talk to me? And he's not quite across the line yet, for, I suppose, obvious reasons or semi-obvious reasons to anybody who's thinking about it. He's probably lucky that they didn't bump him off for even bringing it up publicly, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the government can hide paedophiles in the Prime Minister's office and paedophiles in the judges and paedophiles, and this was the whole thing that, the whole Epstein thing was about. It wasn't about the fact that all of these people went to his island and did whatever they did. The point is that the whole operation is a control operation. It is to get dirt on somebody so that they will toe the line of people behind the scenes. They will do what the Wizard of Oz says behind the curtain, and no one gets to know who the Wizard of Oz is. But we get to see this great and almighty face, Big Brother controlling us, and these people will go along with it. And not only have they been duped into going to Epstein Island, they've gone willingly so that they can be part of the club. I will willingly go and compromise myself to show my loyalty to whatever, and you can get this dirt on me, and you can and I will go and
participate, and
I will participate
as long as I get the spoils.
I will willingly participate and willingly fuck a 14-year-old girl or boy, and you can have this dirt on me, and that shows my loyalty to you. It's very mafia-like, and just the number of high-profile people who've been to Epstein Island from all over the world, including people from Australia. I believe it's Keating's daughter has been there. It just goes to show you how they do it. And people, the objection always used to be, well, they could never get away with it because there's too many people and someone would speak out. Yeah, you don't speak out if you've been fucking kids.
No, that's right. Or any of the other sick shit that's been alleged in various capacities, some of which may seem a bit full on, but who knows? Nothing would surprise me with these people. They're so over the fucking top.
Yeah. And you know, and then they go and meet us, you know, in the various Liberal Party candidate. You know, also like the Liberal Party itself. You know, there are probably genuine people in the Liberal Party, but the people who run the Liberal Party, the people who select who gets to be candidates and who gets to be prime minister and who gets to be a minister, they're not. You know, they're. You know, it's like,
well,
you know,
and those people that you talk about are the ones who take a really good candidate as an example. So it was put up to me at one stage, well, why don't you join the Liberal Party instead of running as a Libertarian? You could run as a Liberal Party and you might get elected. It's like, I don't care if I don't get elected. I'm here to wreak havoc on you assholes in what you do. But somebody who takes that bait, so somebody who's a little bit more PC and probably a little bit more ambitious that way, or, you know, thinks they can fix it, goes, oh, you know, some shady dude comes out, oh, look, we'll back you, we'll support you, we'll put some money behind you, we'll get you elected. Oh, that's great, I can fix it from the inside, I'm going to make all this difference. Hang on, whoa, back, Millie. Yes, you're elected now, but we own you. Slow down, or we'll remove you as quick as we put you in there. So, no, you're going to compromise this. And it starts with little bit. Oh, well, okay, well, I'll give up those two, but I really want this one. Okay, well, you can have your little, you know, somebody like a Craig Kelly or a George Christensen, who I think overall I think they do well, but how they're obviously the least compromised, I suspect, but how far are they just going, right, you can go out there, so there looks like there's some dissidents in our squad, people who are still fighting the good fight, we'll let those lunatics do that. But at the end of the day, they don't come out and go, right, no, well, this is all bullshit, we need to overthrow the whole show. They go, oh, you know, people like that.
They certainly don't fight to expose the paedophiles.
Exactly. And I look at, you know, and there's some. I use Craig Kelly as an example because I think he's far more what a politician should be. You know, what was he, a carpet salesman, some bloody thing, who got himself elected, and he sort of speaks his mind somewhat. And George Christensen's, Amanda Stoker, I think is really, I think she's one of my favourite politicians, you know, in that sphere. She's brilliant. But how far? Where are the breaks? Where are the lines? Why is nobody picking the fight on this suppression order? Why are these people who are in these circles, somebody like a Craig Kelly or a George Christensen, or I use them as examples, and why aren't they going, hang on a minute, what the fuck is to go with this suppression order on pedophiles? Bullshit. I'm moving a motion to have that lifted because that's nonsense, and go to the media and go, this is nonsense. They can talk about climate change and be a dissident, but
they won't go out of the box. They won't. I mean, I've watched Craig Kelly throughout this COVID thing, and it's still 100% partisan. There is absolutely nothing criticizing Scott Morrison and any of the things that Scott Morrison has done. There is nothing criticizing the fact that we need a permit now to leave this country. There is nothing on the bringing foreign troops in. There is not. It's all, you know, against Dan Andrews or against the hydroxychloroquine or against the climate change.
The other team.
Yeah. It's all about that. And at the same time, he just sweeps under the rug anything that his own party has been doing behind the scenes. And to me, that's what the Liberal Party is. The Liberal Party is the deceptive Labour. So Labour and the Greens come out full throttle and say, we're going to do this. We're going to fuck you over. We're going to enslave you. And you're going to like it. And you're going to like it. And people are like, And then for the thinking person, you go, okay, well, what are the Liberal Party saying? And they're going, we're against doing all of these measures for climate change. We're against, you know, oppressing you. We're against all of these things. And they say it openly.
We're not going to oppress you. By the way, here's a whole bunch of new laws that we're going to make sure you have to follow to comply. But we're not oppressing you.
We're not oppressing you, and we're not going to tell you about these laws that we've passed in secret. We're just going to tell you that we're opposing Labour and we're not Labour. But in the end of the day, you know, it was John Howard that took the guns away. It was John Howard that started the whole renewable energy subsidy. It was, you know, Tony Abbott didn't repeal the Paris Agreement, you know, or Malcolm Turnbull. It's the
And people still ask me why I won't.
In Western Australia, the most pernicious law ever passed anywhere in the world, which is our 2016 Health Act. That was liberals. It was the liberals that basically says you can be held down, stripped naked, and force vaccinated. You know, completely against the Nuremberg Code, completely against every international declaration on human rights. They were the ones who abolished it. It wasn't Mark McGowan. Mark McGowan has just come in there and has enacted it. But it was Barnett that actually is here.
They are the same gang. They're just selling slightly different things to ensure. They don't care if it's right, you know, Liberal or Labor in power, as long as it's one of them and it's not One Nation or Liberal Democrats or independents, heaven forbid. And
it's just people who are onto the globalist gravy train, basically. They're implementing Agenda 2030 under our nose. The scary thing is that part of the Agenda 2030 is that the population needs to be reduced by 95%. And there are, you know, there's I can't remember the name of the document. There's a document that was released in 2017, I believe, that basically projects population, the number of people going forward. So I think it was 2025. It was basically projecting the number of people in each country going in 7 years' time, and it basically says America is like 70% fewer people in 2025. I don't know where they. It doesn't tell you why, but basically the whole world. It shows the whole world.
Civil war might drop some numbers a bit for them.
Well, yeah, or you know, a mass vaccination program. Who knows? But there is. I remember, like when I first saw it in.
If we've got to vote on it, can I vote that we start with the political class if we're going to do a cull and start running them down? Let's start with that.
Yeah, well, like that movie Kingsman. But I saw that in 2017, and it was one of the times when I was thinking, oh, that's just too far fetched. That's just too conspiracy theory. That's too. But you know, after all that's happened this year, who knows? Who knows?
That's the worst part about it.
You know,
I used to enjoy a good conspiracy theory for a story, or oh really? Yeah, oh yeah. You know, Area 51. How funny? How cool? You know, you make a good movie out of it. But now the more you're watching and the more notice you take, you think there is some shady shit going on. It's crazy. Did you? I don't know if you noticed that. You probably did because you're very aware of what's going on. A dead guy got elected this week in America.
Got elected or voted?
Elected. No, elected.
Yeah. No, I didn't see that.
A dead Republican was elected into office. He'll be the most efficient. He'll be the most efficient politician on the planet. So a Republican died, I don't know, 3 months ago, of COVID, of course, had to have died of COVID, and he was a Republican. He got elected. He got voted in the other day. Apparently, they can't take them off the ballot once they're on there, and it's like a dead person got elected. So I don't actually care, Republican or Democrat. Your system's broken if dead people are getting elected.
Yeah, it was bad enough that somebody from 1850 was voting. Hey, look, I'm going to campaign for Abraham Lincoln. Bring Abe back. Exhume him.
My argument's always been Harold Holt's the best prime minister we ever had because he had the good decency to pack his shit and fuck off.
Yeah, to drown himself. Yeah,
just to bugger off. Yeah. Hey, look, crazy. So I'll send you the link to the dead guy being elected because let's be fair, that's pretty crazy. You know,
that's funny as hell. That
it pretty well sums up 2020. Dead people are being elected to office, and you just go, "This is madness, absolute crazy, mate." It's always a pleasure for you and I to catch up. I reckon you and I could do days and days worth, but mate, you as always, it's great. How's the book sales going before we sign off?
Yeah, I went down to had a little speech at Parliament a couple of weekends back, and just about everybody who came to the rally came and bought a book off me, which was kind of cool.
Nice, well done. We'll have to get them up on the website.
You should look up that speech, by the way. I've got that speech up. That's I'm quite proud of my speech to Parliament.
Okay, yeah, nice. Yeah, I'll jump on. I'm sure there's a link on your book face or something. Is there?
It's on my YouTube channel, yeah, and it's on my on my Fastbook. On my Fastbook page, and I can't post for another 25 days. So if you scroll down a little bit, you'll find my speech to Parliament.
Yeah, fair enough. I call it book face, Fastbook, all the same thing. It is what it is. Mate, as always, thank you. We'll try and catch up in the next week or two. We've sort of streamlined the program a little bit down to about 3 guests per week just because 6 was just too hard to keep up with for people and a lot of bloody work for me. And now that we're all sort of out of lockdown and we're not quite in isolation like we were, the time is precious.
Yeah, well, we've overrun by 12 minutes, so it's time to sign off.
Yeah, otherwise Dia will yell at me. She'll be like, this program's getting too long again. But at the end of the day, mate, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the best back catalogue in history when the population catches onto it. Of course, we've had some fantastic guests, yourself included. So, mate, thank you as always. We'll catch up next week.
Take care.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this particular episode of Resolute TV. Remember, if you want to support us, we offer you t-shirts, hemp products, and we even have a phone number. And just be sure to like, subscribe, and share it around.